welcome to Meet Your Inspiration podcast with Mary and Rich. Here we talk about inspiration, motivation, and empowerment. Our guests are real people with ordinary stories who became extraordinary. Sharing their stories, we want to inspire you to succeed and to become the person you want to be. We are very happy today to be again at Hampstead House in Sittingbourne, our lovely host for the episode. And we are welcoming Terry from Horace Drones. Hello, Terry, and welcome to our podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm not extraordinary. I'll try to live up to that, and we'll see how we get on.
We met Terry at...
We met down in just outside Folkestone at the castle right. Down there, and we met at a networking event and started talking, and you had lots of interesting stuff to tell us. So, so now we want to share the story a little bit. So if we go back, Terry, first of all, thank you for joining us this evening.
No problem. Thank you very much.
So first of all, how did your journey start? So I know that you finished at school and then you joined the Royal Marines. So first of all, how did that happen?
I guess that happened because, I grew up in a mining village in South Yorkshire. Okay. And the prospects there were probably quite limited. Most people at the time, families, generations worked down the pits, and that was the prospect, or, working in some of the smaller factories. I didn't want that. My father was in the army. I spent a lot of my childhood as an army brat travelling, living in Germany, Northern Ireland, and various places in the UK. And I didn't end up in that mining village in South Yorkshire until I was 11, when my dad left the army. Okay. So obviously I had an experience of military life. I was also in the Air Cadets. So I had this pipe dream to be a pilot. Who wouldn't be as a child? Yeah. So obviously the Air Cadets, joined the Air Cadets. But academically, I was probably not there at the time. So that sort of realization. And then one day when I was probably 13, 14, the Royal Marines came to our school. They came in a helicopter. They fast roped out of it, which effectively is on a rope, just slide down a rope.
Abseil straight down the rope.
Not even abseiling, just with just hands. Yeah.
Oh wow!
I didn't know it was fast roping. I was just awe-inspired by that. The same, and then they came into the school with their gear. You tried putting the backpack on. It's probably just full of sand, but it's super heavy, and just these men, as it were. And obviously, I was a young adolescent, was awe-inspired, and then the more I read about the Royal Marines, commandos, Second World War, I was really interested in those sort of things. The more I just sort of that's what I want to do. So that was my focus, probably from about 13, 14. I can't remember exactly, and, I was always quite active anyway, like running and stuff like that, but I used to go out running after school, pretty good at that sort of stuff. Anyway, so I was almost in training before I was in training, if you know what I mean. Yeah. When you come across various people, some people that joined because they took the wrong turn in the careers office, is where I walked into the careers office, which was about 20 miles away, 2 bus journeys. I was in there and knew exactly what I wanted, and that sort of thing.
Incredible at that age to create that vision in your head, what you want and how to achieve it.
Yeah.
It's a bit remind me of Arnold Schwarzenegger's story. How he had the idea exactly how he trained to be prepared. So you, back at that time, when you knew where you want to go, you knew what you have to achieve and cover the tests. Yes. So you start to prepare yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I did. I mean, obviously, I was just had my mind set on that was the end state, when there was no sort of obstacle that I didn't see that I couldn't get across, So yeah, I joined 2 weeks after my 18th birthday, and I guess never looked back in that sense. That was me. I did 23 years in the Royal Marines.
Did you choose a particular area in the Royal Marines you wanted to get involved with? Because when you go through the career to get into the Royal Marines, obviously sort of everyone goes, well, you're going to the Royal Marines, but no one really knows quite what the Royal Marines do, because it's sort of like a sort of, some people see it's like a bit of a cross between the Navy and the Army, but what do they do, which is different from one or the other?
I
Do
mean,
you understand what I mean?
there's certainly like, perception can be quite varied depending on knowledge of the military. Even family members say, oh, army, when you were in the army and all this sort of stuff, and you're like, how many times have we been through this conversation? Kind of thing. But then obviously you have the banter side with like, oh, you're in the Navy, were you? And you're like, well, I guess technically, but no, at the same time, it's like we are part of the Navy, but
Because you're
we're
attached
also
to a ship.
No. I mean, yeah. So again, that's quite varied. So you can be attached to a ship depending on your specialization, or you are on a land base. So predominantly in the southwest, you've got like Taunton, Plymouth, Exeter, and Barnstable or Chibnall is just down the road. And then up in Scotland, you've got Faslane and Arbroath as the main bases. And then you've got a couple of reserve places in London, Bristol, and Glasgow, the main ones, and Liverpool, sorry. So, yeah, it's quite varied. Did I choose? Probably indirectly, I chose my specialisation, but that was only because I was kind of massaged into that area.
Right.
So obviously, I was 18. Getting through training that's all you can think about. Is I've got to get through training, got to get my green beret, and
at that point it's very physical.
Yeah, I mean, it's physical. Obviously, you're learning everything, but you're also learning to survive in the sense of everything you do, you don't question it, you just do it, kind of thing. And then you sort of like develop more of the reasons why. I think that's slightly different now. I think the youngsters going through, there's much more more structure, I think, to it. The end state is the same, but they get there with more knowledge, I would say, rather than because we're going back 1999 when I went through training.
Okay.
It was very much do as I say, do, and don't question it. Is where I don't think there's the questioning element of it, but people's minds are more curious. You've got Google, so if you're like, I'm not sure about that, Google. You can't bluff anyone now. Is where when I was going through training, you wouldn't even dare question it. You might have a question, but you're like, just keep quiet, otherwise I'm going to be in the pain locker. But yeah, so towards the end of training, we all get asked, where do we want to go? What do you think you want to do? And the default sort of answer was, I want to go to a commando unit. So that would be 4-2 Commando, 40 Commando, or 4-5 Commando. That's what people join the Royal Marines to do traditionally. That's the front line element of the Royal Marines. You've obviously got like rear echelon logistics and command and control and all those sort of things. But you don't want to do that when you've just done Royal Marines training. You want to be like, I want to be in the action, as it were. So I was very much like, I want to go to 4-5 Commando, which is in Scotland, renowned for, mountain and cold weather warfare. Even though all the others at the time did all of those things, they had the reputation because historically that's what they did a lot of. So I wanted to go there, and I wanted basically to be in machine guns. And at the time, there was the GPMG, which is sort of a medium weight machine gun, and the heavy machine gun was just coming in, but it wasn't in my specialization at the time. So I was talking about, I want to be HMG operator, which is a heavy machine gun operator, and all this sort of stuff. And I think they listened to the heavy bit and went, oh, he wants to be heavy weapons.
Wow.
So, it's like, I said heavy, but not heavy weapons. But, it did end up being two of the same thing, ultimately. So I ended up being, about 6 months after training, I ended up doing my anti-tank course to become a Milan operator, which was the anti-tank system we were using at the time. Went up to 4-5, which is what I wanted. And very quickly then went over to Kosovo not long after, doing peacekeeping in Pristina.
Wow.
So I was at this age 19. Yeah.
So then were you going from a green beret to a
No. It wasn't it was a UN. It was KFOR. It was part of a NATO mission, not a UN mission. There was UN missions there, like the police and stuff like that. There were UN, but the military element was a NATO backed operation, as it were. So, no, I mean, throughout my career, I've not done a UN operation where I've had to wear a blue beret, for example. So, no, but I mean, that's not to say that doesn't happen. But we don't Romans generally don't get involved in that stuff so much now, and the Romans are certainly trying to, move away from that part to more specialised in certain areas. And I keep saying we because it's still ingrained in me that
because it's a team. Everything is about teamwork.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. There is no individual
because it's a unit. Everything is a unit.
Yeah, everything is about a unit, body of men. Oh, well, I say men, but people.
Yeah.
Obviously, it is predominantly male, but.
Can I go back? So, how long when you do the training to get the green beret? How is that a fixed program? Does it take everyone so it's like a fixed times, a number of weeks, and to get that point, and then you pass or you don't?
Yeah. So when I was in training, it was 30 weeks. I believe now it's 32. It was 32, but it might have changed again as the syllabus changes for different tactics, different the way operations are dealt with. So I'm obviously a little bit out of the loop in that sense. But when I was in training, it was 30 weeks, and you basically had 3 strikes and you're out. That is very different now. If you failed one thing, you could go back 2 weeks. If you got injured, you would go to a specialist troop for rehabilitation, which was called Hunter Troop. It's that's grown quite big now, and that's again much more structured. That's about people learn at different paces, but ultimately, if you get injured, fix you, try and put you back into training at an appropriate point. You usually find that the people who have been in troop are actually better because they have a training syllabus. They're not just there like, I've got a broken leg, I can't do anything. They're still doing military skills and stuff like that, learning and developing. But I was lucky in the sense of I didn't get back trooped, and I also didn't get injured. So I did I did the 30 weeks. And then, so, yeah, I think out of 52, I want to say 52, I can't remember exactly, but it's about 52 started, only 14 of us finished who started at the beginning together, and that's pretty common, for various reasons. You do have a lot of people who, I didn't realise it was like this, those moments like, I don't like this, don't like being told what to do and stuff like that. So some people go in very green and not realising that, military life is about listening, doing, not always questioning. We do train our people, or the Royal Marines train their people to be thinking soldiers, but there's a time for thinking and there's a time for doing as you're told.
Following actions.
Exactly. Sometimes you just can't question it. You can obviously ask at a later point. But that's not to say that if something's going drastically wrong or you can see a flaw in the plan, that you can't raise your hand and question it.
And obviously in training you can do that, but once you...
No, in training that's pretty much
you just
carte blanche.
Yeah, just follow.
Just do as you're told.
Yeah.
Yeah.
obviously during all this process, did you still get these vibes and this passion that you are on the right track to where
I never questioned it.
you never you
once.
Wow.
That there has been many a times after training, like I don't like being wet and cold, don't like being tired. So I do question that. What was I thinking when I was in training? Because
you were going for the north side and you wanted to go the cold bit.
I was just doing it. If someone said get in the water, you were in the water. If someone said, you're not sleeping, you're doing X, Y, and Z, never questioned it. But then obviously when you go into, throughout your career, you're like, I don't want to get wet. Why would I do that? I don't want to do that kind of thing. So
particularly when the water's really cold.
Exactly.
Cold water, and you've got to stay there and see how long you can sort of put up with it.
Yeah.
Situation.
You do. It's like, it's day one. I don't want wet feet because we're going to be here for weeks, kind of thing. It's all of those sort of things. But, when I was that young 18-year-old and someone said jump in the water, you just jumped in, no questions asked. Whether it had ice on the top or not, you just got in there and put on with it. Yeah, so
take me a bit back to when you mentioned Kosovo, and this time you said you were 19.
Yeah, 19.
How did this affect you? Obviously, I don't know how much we can go in details, but how much you were involved and how this affects one 19 years old boy.
That's a really good question. I didn't know what to expect. Is there anything that can prepare you for that? You are kind of prepared because you've gone through the training and you have to trust that you're training. But then the training that you do at the beginning is about war fighting. They're training you to be a war fighter, not a peacekeeper. So we obviously did some peacekeeping training prior to going there. But still, that's still like.
I assume you never prepare for something when it's actually happening. You learn a lot. You
just
got the knowledge. But
obviously, I was very green then, so I would just have to learn off the people around me. Like some people had been to Northern Ireland, or they'd been, maybe somewhere else, Bosnia, for example, or something like that. So you have to leverage those and just listen and be a sponge, take it all in, and just adapt. You have to be very
balanced in terms of between the younger guys and the older, more experienced guys, and some of them maybe have been in already for like 6, 7, 8 years and already done lots of.
Yeah, you will get that. I think when I was that 19-year-old, it was very much a lot of people who were of similar rank but been in 10 years or so. That's kind of changed quite a lot because a lot of people don't, promotion's not coming, they don't stay as much anymore as when I joined. It was quite common to have a 22-year Marine, which is like they've been a Marine for their whole career. They haven't gone up the ranks, but that's not because they not necessarily couldn't. It's maybe their choice. Is where people these days are much more driven by those promotions and stuff, and all that sort of stuff. They're thriving for it, and when I was a sergeant major towards the end of my career, I'd say to lads, don't be in a rush to get there. Enjoy it while you can, because with the rank comes responsibilities and, change in all of that sort of stuff. But also you want to be progressive so that you've got experience to fall back on, because like what I'm saying there, when you've got those youngsters and they're looking at you as a leader,
you need to be able to.
They need to understand. They're looking at you for reassurance that what is going on is within the capability of the group as a collective, and they're looking at you for guidance, including young officers who have passed out of officer training and stuff like that. They're maybe 20. In their early 20s, but they're in charge of 30 men, for example. But the person who is got the experience will be the troop sergeant, who's probably hovering around about 10 to 15 years on average.
And they would then advise the officer sometimes in certain cases, because obviously the officer would be quite young, as you said.
It's very much sort of I guess it's kind of like almost a mother and father type relationship. Dad knows best, but mum's telling she's the boss.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like that in its rawest state.
Yeah, it's interesting.
But yeah, but the face of it is that, I had a couple of really good, when I was a troop sergeant, I had a couple of really good young officers, and once they kind of get past that, the airs and grace is, we could shut the office door and we could have quite a frank conversation, whether I agreed with what he wanted to do, or like there's a better way. We'd have that conversation. We'd walk out of that room, and whatever he said then, we were doing that.
Yeah.
Because ultimately it's down to him.
He's the boss.
I can only advise, it's advice.
Yeah.
It's not me telling him.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's quite often you would have a frank conversation.
Yeah.
Was there fear during this time when you had, especially on missions? I assume they're called. Were you when you go to Kosovo? Is that called a mission, or what is it called?
I mean, overarching is, we call it an operation.
Okay, operation.
Yeah, I mean, they're two of the same
had
thing. Really.
That feeling of to be scared or
no.
fear, or
I don't remember ever being scared per se. I remember being excited that this is my first tour.
Okay.
This is what I joined for. All of this stuff, all the stuff that you ever read is about this, that, and the other, and you kind of like, this is what I want. Don't want to be back in the UK or on an exercise. You want to be on an operation. And that's how you build that experience. And being on the operation, see all that sort of stuff. I mean, when I look back at my career, that was like the start. I think I was really lucky to start with something that was quite tame, because Kosovo was tame. It was peacekeeping.
Yeah.
When I was a corporal or a sergeant in Iraq or Afghanistan, and you're like that, for some of these lads, they're passing out of training and going straight into a physical war where the people are trying to kill you on a daily basis. Is where my introduction was, keep two fractions separated, and there might come across some weapons, but normally they're just trying to smuggle them around, the city or the country. So that was totally different. So I look and think I had a nice introduction to operations, how they work, all that sort of stuff. And then quite quickly then progressed into progressively, harder and harder
tours. The unit. So when you're in a unit like that and you're out in an active, now obviously, like as you say, in the peacekeeping it's slightly different, but if you're going as a unit and you're going into the field of war, into a conflict situation, is the mindset always focused that, look, you are so well prepared, you don't fear about anything else that can happen around you because you know what you're going to do? Or are the members of the group that you can see that start to sort of like become nervous? Because there must be a very difficult balance between those who almost just feel invincible, they just go in, and their courage overcomes everything. And how does that work? Because that must be quite difficult.
That's an interesting, question. I guess you do all your preparation. So I'll give you an example. The first tour I did was Kosovo. Did that. Didn't know any better. We came back from that. We did this basically just as the Twin Towers, came down. We were going to an exercise in Oman. It's quite a big exercise. Yeah. So that was like, I think, a week or two. I can't remember exactly, but it was literally like right on that stepping stone of, and the whole talk was about going into Afghanistan and all that. So we went to Oman thinking that we're going to Oman and then we're going to go to Afghanistan. So there was all of this build up, a lot of hype in the press. It turned out that part of my unit did go straight to Afghanistan. I actually went back to the UK and then went to Afghanistan. So effectively, within a week or two, the whole unit had been moved around the world to go into Afghanistan. And, again, this is a whole new experience to me in the sense of we, done the training, all the hype, you kind of like, and we're going.
Mm.
So we're already getting news flash, sort of daily reports on the guys who are already in Afghanistan. And then obviously we're joining. But I think you kind of, and when I think I got off the plane in Afghanistan in the pitch black, we'd been sat on the floor of the plane with no seats, just sat on the floor of this plane.
Wow.
Getting out the back, and you don't know what to expect.
And where had you flown from to get there? Did you literally fly from Brize Norton?
From Brize Norton. So we flew from Brize Norton to, I think, Kabul.
Okay.
In a more civilianized type plane.
Yeah.
And then we transferred to a Hercules, which is a transport plane.
Yeah. Into Helmand.
This was into Bagram. So this was further up north. So this was in 2002.
Yeah.
2002. Up in the mountains, up in the north. And so one, I'd never been in the back of a plane where they don't check that your seatbelts are on. And you're flying in the pitch black.
Yeah.
And you can just, the atmosphere is like, it's definitely silent, even though it's really noisy.
Yeah, okay.
But no one's talking. It's all like, because everyone's there in their own mind, like, I don't know what I'm
this
about.
Is the mindset moment
about to go into.
Yeah.
So I guess people are gathering their thoughts, their moments, all of a sudden it's like the banter's gone, all of that sort of thing. It's like, this is real. And then I got off this plane, and what do I see on the other side? A great big camera and Sky News presenters like filming us getting off this plane.
Wow.
And you kind of like, well, that's a bit of an anticlimax. So I was kind of thinking like...
You're going to get off the plane and you're about to get shot.
Yeah, kind of thing. But when you think about that, every time I've been on a helicopter or a plane that you are about to go onto a mission or an operation, you get that everyone sits down or stands wherever they are, and it's kind of like the eerie silence, because you're about to go into the hornet's nest, as it were, and people potentially are going to get hurt, or you just don't know what's going to happen, but you get that eerie silence. But I guess everyone's going through that process of, I'm surrounded by all of the people that I want to be surrounded by. I couldn't be surrounded by better people. And you just have to trust and believe that, whatever happens, I've got really good people around me, and I have never questioned in my 23-year career on operations the people who are around me. I've questioned people before it, when we're in that training phase, but like I said to you before, some people are just learning differently at different paces, but then all of a sudden everything's just like, it just clicks. And you get this really good gelled body of men, because the team doesn't just start because somebody's turned up. They're just a bunch of individuals, and we've got to bring them all together for cohesion. And you think like those individuals, let's say 30 individuals, some of them are already worked together, some are brand new, straight out of training, like you might have a new troop commander, so we've all got to understand how we all work, what clicks, what doesn't, what annoys people, all of those sort of things. So, those are all built up. But by the time you get onto the operations, you're like, yeah, I know who I can rely on. I know who I need to keep an eye on, and mentor in that sense, and I'm saying me mentor, but everyone's helping each other out. Yeah,
and that's a mutual thing, and that's one of the big differences between the structure, obviously, you've got in the forces, and almost the lack of structure you've got in a business. The two things are almost important, the same, but it often doesn't quite work so well in the conventional workplace, because like people just come into roles and they're sort of trained in their own different way, but they're not really trained to interact with each other in the same way. In that sense, as a unit, you are absolutely all for each other, to support each other, and that, the real element of teamwork is in its most critical phase in that point.
Yeah, I mean, in the military, the biggest thing that everyone doesn't want to be is the Jack. Looking after yourself. You do not want to be labelled Jack. So you are working your hardest to make sure that you're not perceived as being Jack. You're part of the team. You're looking after everyone else before yourself in a lot of respects. So all of those things, because you don't want that stigma of you're Jack. Nobody wants that. And that's a very derogatory thing to be called Jack. So yeah, you're fighting your inner self. To make sure that everyone's.
I like what you
all right.
said, that obviously before you jump or whatever, that you all these values, belief, trust, and to the people around you. Is that something that obviously it's one of the lessons or experiences that you learn, and I assume help you later in the career? What the Royal Marines give you as well in terms of knowledge and values? Because this teamwork, I think it's incredible that you've done to rely so much to the person next to you.
Yeah, I think it's just a mindset. It's a collaborative mindset. Ultimately, the Royal Marines have its ethos and its mindset, but ultimately it's all about, you can do incredible things together, but as an individual, it's much, much harder. So therefore, you've got to entrust the people around you, because, you have a strength, you have your weaknesses, but together, you can equal those out. And obviously people have bad days and good days and stuff like that, because we're all human. We can all do different things at different paces, and we have our bad moments and good moments at different times. So you can lift each other up, in the sort of spiritual way. When the chips are down, you need somebody sometimes just to
keep it positive,
get it back up, and stuff like that. And
there are only difficult times when you end up obviously you're a unit of like however many in that particular unit, but are there any points when you get sort of maybe down to 1, 2, or 3 in a particular section, and then you really are looking out for each other? Because obviously the smaller the group of you, the more vulnerable, I guess, you are in some ways.
Yeah, I mean, the smaller you are, you are vulnerable in the sense of...
You're agile, I guess, as well.
But much more agile, but you're also much more cohesive as well, because you are effectively eating, sleeping, fighting together. Four men is the smallest sort of size that you would go.
Yeah.
Realistically, if you're any smaller than that, then you've got lost. kind of thing. You're in the wrong place.
Because it's like obviously in a workplace, if you work in industry, like normally you've got 3 shifts, covering 24 hours. Whereas obviously if there's 4 of you in that situation, and through the night, if you're in an active point, you can't all have a sleep together. Someone's got to be on watch and keep an eye on, and someone's got to be ready to go.
It'd be like 50-50 then. You'd be like,
You do 2 and 2 sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Interesting.
You always work buddy-buddy. So we always call that buddy-buddy. You look after your buddy, particularly like in Norway, for example, and it's freezing cold. You can't see whether you get in the start of frost nip or bite on your cheeks or your ears, for example. So, when you stop, you'd be like looking and going, oh, you need to, your nose has gone white. You need to, warm it up, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that's a buddy-buddy system because, you can quite often see, you've got quite determined people. Let's say you're in Norway and one of the guys is starting to get hypothermia, but he's probably not going to go, oh, I don't feel right. He's probably doesn't want to let the team down. So you kind of have to look out for each other in that sense and go, I think you might be.
And obviously, when you're in that situation, like I guess in the northern part of Norway, I'm sure you've experienced some extreme cold, and I certainly have, because years ago I went to St. Petersburg, and I've also been to Moscow.
Yeah.
And when you're in that situation, I was in Moscow and it was minus 24 degrees, and I know that is cold, and it really feels cold. And over here, people experience minus 5 or whatever. They go, it's freezing. But it's a different kind of cold, and that exposure time. When you're in that situation, obviously you've got your layers on and you're fairly well protected. But the exposed parts, it doesn't take long for those exposed parts.
No, it doesn't. I know
extreme cold.
We obviously have PPE to you can go full face mask and goggles and stuff like that. But that's the kind of point where the buddy says, oh, your nose or your ears, you'd be like, oh, you need to put the flaps down on your hat, for example, or put a face mask on, to prevent those sort of things. But when you're skiing along, your nose is cold and you can't feel it. But you think it, you can't see that.
It goes numb.
Yeah, exactly. So, but you can't see in that sense. But it's all environments. It's that sort of process. Even to the point we have this thing called a reorg. So if we've been in a firefight and you just kind of get to a point where you reorg and you can kind of administer yourself before setting back off. But you might have been shot because of the adrenaline. You might not realise that. Yeah. So you're then relying on a buddy looking at you because you might be breathing heavily, adrenaline's going and all the rest of it, and you're just going into fight mode, as it were.
Yeah.
And somebody be like, there's blood. What is that kind of thing? Do you know what I mean? So it's every aspect that we're always looking out for each other. Even on a night out downtown, don't leave a man who's drunk, in the corner, asleep kind of thing. Make sure he gets home and that sort of thing. And that's where it all builds up from. It starts off with those sort of trivial, what might seem trivial, I just got him in a taxi and got him home, but it starts there, and then you transfer that into the battlefield of war and stuff like that.
All these experiences, then and what you learn, I assume you're using on your daily life now, and probably in your
probably on autopilot. Probably not even.
Yeah, exactly. You don't
think
think about it, but 23 years to do it is quite long.
I mean, one thing that I am absolutely dead on is I will always be early.
Yeah.
Always early.
Yeah.
That's ingrained in me. Turn up minimum of 5 minutes beforehand to everything. And it gripes me when people don't turn up on time. And if I know I'm going to be late, I don't wait until I am late. I would tell people that I'm running late, I'm stuck in traffic, because people are, well, I'm only 5 minutes late, but you're like, yeah, but I've got stuff to do. I could be doing something else, but I'm waiting for you. And it really annoys me.
I've got this as well when, if I remember when I was young and I had a couple of friends, if I have a meeting with them at 7, I know that if I say 7, earliest they're going to come is 6:30. I just knew they work that way. So that's why I always say 1 hour, one time, because I'm person as well, always to be early.
Yeah.
Prefer to be early. But what makes you to leave then? It's come the moment when it's enough and you want to just move and do something different?
Yeah, so the standard sort of length of career is 22 years. That's when you qualify for your pension, and that's when your full term contract is up. When I got selected for promotion, I got a 1-year extension so that I could do a particular job for 2 years. And then at the time I was, I wanted to stay on. But I was living in Scotland then. My son was born in June. July, I moved back to Folkestone. I went on a course, so I left my family here, went on a course down in Limpston near Exeter. Did my course, passed the course, started my new job in North Devon in Chivner. So then it was move the family again. So my life had changed because prior to, Freddie being born in June 19, it was me. Yes, I'd been married, but it was me and one other. It wasn't a child. And, that changed everything. And I was like, so that 22-year point, and I'm now in my new job. The family's moved to North Devon. It was COVID, which was really frustrating because we're in North Devon, but can't really do anything. But it was the realization that I don't know where I'm going to go next. The average draft is 2 to 3 years. I don't know where I'm going to go next. I could end up going back to Scotland. I could, go to Plymouth. But the reality is I didn't know. And if I didn't know then, I didn't know what I would do the 2 years after that. But I knew I'd be doing a similar sort of job. Because obviously the higher up the ranks you go, the less and less jobs there is available. So I did apply for a 5-year extension, but the reality of, I guess, not knowing whether I was going to get accepted for the 5-year extension. I was already into a 1-year extension, but I didn't know whether I was going to get that. I was then starting to look on the other side of the field. Grass are greener on the other side, as it were. It turns out it's not, but we all know that in retrospect.
At that point, because if we go back to sort of like the time around the end of COVID, I mean, at that point, I'm sure there's different things happening around the world, and there's always something going on that we don't always know about. But obviously, what's going on in the world today is very different from what was going on 3 years ago, and at that point, because there was no real particular action, did that also change the mindset in terms of thinking, well, there's nothing really like at this point, it's the right time to come out and to make that decision rather than when there's something about to happen?
Yeah, I guess in a way, I mean, like, it's ironic because the day I actually signed off was the day that the Russians went into Ukraine. So that was a bit of a anticlimax for me leaving because everyone's thinking about Ukraine and not me leaving, as it were. But potentially, yes, it was obviously a quieter time. Lots of the guys that were under my command were, working in hospitals, driving ambulances, preparing to drive petrol tankers, all of these sort of stuff to support the
logistics,
this civil authorities in the UK, where they were obviously on their knees for various different reasons through COVID.
Of course, because of COVID,
yeah.
Absolutely.
So a lot of my guys were doing that, and I was just purely in a sort of, a managerial point of view, making sure that we were fulfilling the requirements, making sure the guys were looked after from afar, all of those sort of things. So I guess my role was, very much desk driven, as it were. But that's the reality, the further up the ranks you go, you are more tied to a desk because you're in a managerial position. So I guess that might have swayed things a little bit. I mean, don't get me wrong, if we were preparing to go to war, I probably would have said, I want to stay. As a selfish, Royal Marine, that's what I've done for 23 years. But like I say, things had changed because I now have a son, it's kind of like...
Change of priority.
Yeah, exactly. So, I was very much set on whether I leave now or in 5 years' time, I'm leaving.
Yeah.
I've come to the point where, you know, they are keeping me on because they have a requirement, not because they're looking after me as an individual. You know, as an individual, then, you know, I'm a number, as it were. You know, and that sort of, you're solving their problem for a period of time, if that makes sense. But, you know, that's just the reality of...
So at that point, so now you've got a point, so you know you're going to come out. Now, obviously, it's quite a different structure from being in an organisation like the Marines, where everything is organised and everything is layered in, and now you're going to adjust, and you're going to come out into the structure of business and commerce, and you've got to choose which direction you're going to go. I mean, that must be quite, because like you're used to being ordered to do this and to do that, or
giving the orders,
or giving orders to do it, and all of a sudden now you've got to adjust into a role which is not something, unless you were obviously controlling logistics. That's obviously sort of similar, I guess, if you were doing that kind of thing. But not everything you then go into. So how did you now choose to go into something different, and how was that adjustment time in terms of structure? Because that must be quite challenging and interesting.
Yeah, it's very challenging, and still is a challenge. I thought I was prepared to leave. I thought I was doing the right thing, and, you know, I had an opportunity with Barclays. Barclays gave me an absolutely excellent opportunity to sample the corporate world or the financial services. So I did effectively a 6-month internship where I was still being paid by the military, but working in Barclays as a business manager. So for 6 months, I almost had a try before you buy kind of thing. You know, and the Royal Marines were very supportive. 6 months is not standard. Three at a very push, but I managed to negotiate, let's say.
So is that often the way? Did you often get often that internship or apprenticeship or training in that structure at that sort of 6 months, 12 months before you leave the forces to go into business?
Everyone's entitled to some sort of resettlement. The longer you serve, the longer that resettlement is. It's not significantly more. You know, there's sort of like, if you do, I can't remember what it is, but let's say you do 8 years, it's almost the same as 23. But, you know, if you do 4, it's quite minimal, because obviously there isn't as much transition required. But I initially wanted to do project management. I was like, project management, it's what we do. We call it something different in the military, but we're managing projects. Yeah. You know, and I wanted to do that. But the reality is the areas that I wanted to go into was like construction, civil engineering, you know, pretty much on the shop floor, you know, doing projects. But they're always after, like, have you got experience in this? So we like loads of experience in project management in various different fields. But no, I haven't been a project manager in a construction project, you know, or an engineering project or whatever. All right, well, you know, and then you look at the price range, you're like, oh, for even a senior project manager, you're like, well, I'll be getting less pay than I am in the military. You know, why would I leave to get less pay? You know, no one leaves a job to have less pay, kind of thing. And then I got talking to a friend who was working for HSBC. And he sort of said, oh, well, you thought about financial services. And I'm thinking, what have I got to offer financial services? Like, can barely spell. You know, can't add 2 and 3 together, kind of thing. It's kind of like, but then obviously you have a conversation, and then I was thinking, well, in the Royal Marines, I've pretty much done a different job every 2 years. And yes, I've started off not knowing the job. Within 6 months, you know, you're picking it up, and then you're kind of almost happy days. I'm fairly confident. So I had that mindset of going into Barclays, and, you know, like, I don't know it now, but in 6 months' time I will. So you had to believe in that. So, you know, I did the military talent scheme. I managed to land well, I got offered 3 roles. So I applied for 3 roles, and they were all very different. One was working in effectively their operations room, managing, physical and cyber security, basically a tiger team. If there's something happened, you'd be there and obviously make sure all of the right coordinations would happen. Very much military, and there is a lot of ex-military people who do that sort of stuff. They were going to match the same pay as what I went for as a business manager. So it was kind of like that. And the other one was as a project manager for their online learning portal stuff. So it was a bit more like that, and discussions with various people. But the job that I went for, I was actually working directly for a board member in Barclays in HR. So everyone was like, "Wow, that's a fantastic opportunity." You can go places that, if you're working for the board member, then they'll know you personally, and potentially your career could skyrocket. So obviously I was like, right, I've just got to go for it, kind of thing. So I did. That was my mindset is, I'm just going to jump in with both feet, and you either sink or swim, I guess, as it were. So I jumped into business management in which are HR business partners, and I was a business manager. So I was 2 down, I guess. You have the board member, her sort of direct business manager, and then I was that business manager's number 2, I guess, as it were. But yeah, it was different. They call it leadership. It's definitely a different version of leadership than what I've experienced, or what I perceive leadership as. And you kind of alluded to it earlier. A lot of these people are in a leadership position because they've either been there long enough and they have the corporate knowledge, or they've applied and just passed an interview, kind of thing.
Even though they don't necessarily have all the skill sets to lead.
Yeah, and the maximum people they might have led is a team of 3, and you're like, team of 3. I was doing that when I was 20 years old. Do you know what I mean? Or a team of 4, but it's kind of like, it's just different. And I don't want to badmouth where I ended up, but there was no leadership.
But being the role you were in the Royal Marines as the sort of almost the commanding officer next to the officer, in a real strong position, would be the equivalent to going into business and being a director in charge of a team of 30, 40, 50 people. It's a very different structure, isn't it?
It's very different. And also in the military, it's 2-tiered, but almost conjoined in the sense of, you've got a troop commander and you've got a troop sergeant. They work together. And obviously as they go up the ranks, you're talking an officer who's been in the military for 20, 25 years. He's got knowledge, but so's the other guy next to him who is, there, and it's very different knowledge.
Because one's like a team leader, and the other one's a strategist, effectively.
Yeah, it kind of
effective, isn't it?
Kind
so
of like,
those 2 are working together.
And you're always confirming. But I think this is where it's very different in the corporate world. Is they have a big idea, they talk about it, they get consultants in, and all of that sort of stuff, but they never really think about the impact on the individuals. It's about, how do we save money? How can we do this more efficiently? The priorities are very different in that sense, as where in the military, don't get me wrong, there is obviously those efficiencies, cost savings go on, but the impact on the people is far more on the forefront of thought than what I experienced in the corporate world. But all of the individuals in there, I made some really good friends, but everyone's a colleague. They're not a friend. Do you know what I mean? Everyone refers to you as colleague and stuff like that. And you're like, I thought we were friends. that was very alien to me. I'd never called anyone a colleague in my whole life.
Because obviously,
it was like
on a
your
different
mates, and
you're always looking out for each other.
Yeah,
whereas like in the working
and you go out for a
each
drink
other.
and stuff like that, and but the corporate world was very alien to me, and
sometimes it's only like maybe one or two people have become friends in the workplace. Sort of they might all get out, or if they go out as the group, and they're all sort of talking on the table, but they're all talking about each other in that little team. They're not really.
It's because they work together for numbers
all
of
your
years.
leadership and management skills, basically, you learned them while you were in the Marines. That was through the experience, through the people around you, obviously. This was the way that
the corporate world didn't offer me anything other than I know definitely how not to do it.
This is not
but
a bad
you don't
lesson
realize
as
that.
well.
You don't realize that. I didn't take it for granted that the Royal Marines taught me everything about leadership, team building, and all that sort of stuff. And I go to the corporate world and they don't know nothing. I went there thinking these guys are going to know it. They might do it slightly differently. But then when I got there and I'm like going,
that doesn't work for you.
It didn't work for me. It obviously works because these big corporate businesses have been going for some of them hundreds of years, like Barclays, like 300 plus years.
They along almost. It's almost
and they
not necessarily by design. It just happens, and it just works together. It just happens to fit.
And they're very quick to obviously move people along if.
And the bigger the organisation, the harder it is for them to be organised. Whereas in smaller businesses, they tend to be much more lean, and they tend to be much more focused, and
much more personal as well.
And it gets back to we're often talking about, the passion behind the project. And if you've got a passion, you believe in the project, then you can deliver it forward. And obviously in the forces, you have that passion to work together, and everyone's driven, and they're empowered to do it. But often in the corporate world, it's not really. It can be very alien to that.
I had, and I use this as an example. So my line manager rang me up on a Friday about 4:30. On one particular Friday, she wanted to know where a particular report was. And I said, I'm just finishing it off now. And she said to me, that needs to be on board members' desk before Monday. So basically that meant I needed to do it tonight. So I was like, obviously I wasn't happy about it. The phone goes down, the Teams call ends, and the little red light comes up on, I'm away for the weekend. So I'm there working on this report till 9:30 on a Friday. So I'm sat in my house with my partner downstairs, my son in bed, and I've spent no time on a Friday with them. And this is where the leadership, in my view, lack of leadership, lack of team spirit is lacking. Because if I walk past somebody's desk and they were still working at 4:30 on a Friday, I'd be like, what are you doing?
This is your time at this point.
Time to go.
And it's like, I'm not just going to walk out the door and go, right, have a good weekend. It's like, what can I do to help? You don't just, that's the team ethos, is like, how can we get this across the line so we can all have a weekend rather than
I'm going and you can stay too.
Because, it's almost like that delegation in this example at Barclays was, I've delegated to this, it's now your responsibility. But it isn't. It's the line manager's responsibility. So therefore, why would you walk away and leave it to it? That was, at that moment there, I knew that Barclays was not the place for me to be. I just knew that there was no team. There was no team in the team. And we were a very small team as well. So, I just,
And how they say, corporate world is not for everyone. There are lots of people who can't fit in it, and they don't feel it's their role. So
Yeah.
that means you spent just the 6 months, or you left even earlier?
No. I mean, I did the 6 months and then 2 years
Oh, okay. You
on
spent.
as in a paid role.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then came the moment
Yeah. Well.
for.
So if we go through, go back. So you get to this point in working in Barclays in the organisation, and you get to the point where you think this is not working for me, and then you wanted to go out and do something different and find your own business or find a different career path. So how did that come about, and how did you get to sort of decide to go into the drone business? That's quite a story, I'm sure, between one and the other.
Yeah, it is. It's quite a long story as well. That's the problem. So I knew pretty early on that Barclays wasn't right for me, but you have to give these things a chance. You know, like within a matter of weeks, I knew it wasn't right, but you keep plodding on, it'll get better. It'll get better. And I also suffered quite a lot with imposter syndrome.
Yep.
You know, I was now in an environment that I had no training whatsoever. That was very alien to me as well, in the sense of
completely out of your comfort zone.
Completely. You know, like in the military, you get given training. You are assessed to make sure that you are current, competent to move forward into a new rank or a new position.
Yep.
So when somebody then gives you the thumbs up that you're good, you have the confidence to go, I don't know everything, and like we alluded to earlier, but in 6 months' time I will. You know, you never know everything, but I will understand my role, my position, and what's expected of me within those 6 months. So I joined Barclays thinking, well, somebody's going to look after me. Somebody's going to show me the ropes. Somebody's going to, you know, give me some guidance, some coaching, mentoring, you know, all of those sort of things. And it's kind of just like, well, where do I even find this information from? So you ask people. Oh, yeah, I don't know. You just got to find out. A lot of the time, that's the sort of blockers that I would get. And you know, they're obviously working to tight deadlines. So you're like, I'm in embuggerance to them. You know, I'll try searching again on the, you know, the intranet, but internal internet and all that sort of stuff. So I'd always that. But then you'd ask the line manager and she'd be like, well, I don't know. You know, I've never done this before neither. You know, I just have to work it out. But they have a network. You don't have a network. When I was in the military, if I didn't know something, I knew someone who did.
Yep.
So you'd pick up the phone, you'd walk to the office, or you would send an email. You know, office, phone, email, in that order is where obviously the corporate world is. Email. Wait. No response. That's just typical.
Yeah.
Even though you might be able to see that person about 50 metres up the office, kind of thing.
You can't just walk up and go, excuse me.
Well, I mean, you can. I'm not saying you can't, but quite often you just don't know that that person's 50 metres away from you because, you know, you've never met these people or you never worked together. Yeah. So I found that very hard. And like one of the elements I also found hard, you know, and this is probably self-propagating in itself, is I used to be somebody. People come to me for advice, opinion.
Yep.
And now I'm nobody. I'm nobody in this big corporate world. I'm being paid more money than I've ever been paid before. And I was so unhappy. I was working probably 12 plus hours a day, you know, and I was just so unhappy. You know, and all of these things. So, and I think making that conscious decision to leave the Marines and turn down a 5-year extension also played on my mind. So I was like, imposter syndrome, you know, deeply unhappy with the job, going on the train, you know, to London.
There was multiple elements of stress around the whole thing.
Yeah, and I was just, you know, as time goes on, it wasn't getting better.
Yeah.
You know, and I was kind of like I guess you're in a spiral. You can see what the problems are, but you don't know how to solve them. Which ended up leading to a very dark place where I actually considered taking my own life. I'd probably been, at this point, been out of the military maybe about a year. It was about July last year, and I had a bad day in the office where, the office was just stale. It was stagnant. Nobody really bothered engaging with you. You tried to say, oh, does anyone want to go for lunch? And everyone would be like, no, I'm going to eat at the desk today. And that's the most conversation I had. So that was very alien to me as well, because the military, it was always about, you solve all your problems in the mess. You've got a problem.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I can sort that out. I'll speak to Joe when I see him in the mess. Sorted.
Because it's in those informal conversations.
Yes.
There are the meetings. The meetings were going on, and then you go back into the room and do the action.
Yeah, exactly. You go, I'll sort that out for you this afternoon, and it would be done. Or like, if you speak to such, you'll be able to sort it out. So there was all of those sort of real physical connections that you had, even if you didn't know the person really well, but you knew him well enough to have a conversation and ask him for a favour or whatever kind of thing. So, yeah. And in around about July last year, I just got to that point where I was like, I cannot continue with what I'm doing. And I didn't know what to do, and I was worried about not being able to provide for my family, in the sense of, we now obviously have this standard of living on the money that I've got, and I just felt like a failure, because I didn't fit into Barclays. I tried everything.
You couldn't find the motivation on the will and the
and I was sat on it, and I don't know if you ever been to Stratford train station. I was sat on Stratford train station, well, on one of those little seats that you lean on more than sit on, and I just considered throwing myself in front of a train.
Wow.
But that wasn't an instantaneous thought. I'd been building up in my head a very, very dark place.
Yeah.
But okay, you've got this problem with the work, but you came from really strong, obviously, what you built and you've done for the last 23 years. You had your family, you had your child. How, in the head of a man so successful, I would say, because through my eyes you are successful, how you let just one thing, which is not even your failure, it's just obviously somewhere where you can't fit, how this gets so big impact to you, and you never share these thoughts with the people around you? Did you look for help, or just to share all these,
I guess,
thoughts, how unhappy you are?
My partner Sharon, she obviously knew I was unhappy. She could see that my soul was just literally disappearing, and it felt like that. I felt like I was just lost.
Why is it difficult to take a decision? No, I'm just stop going there, I'm not going to work there? Or it comes obviously the point that you are the person who need to bring
I didn't want
the money.
I guess part of what you always want to do is, you want to show people around you that you're not a failure. You want to make people proud. You kind of have those sort of desires to make people proud, and I didn't want to admit failure to anyone, so I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want anyone to think that I was failing, but I was failing.
But why failing? Sorry, I'm a bit, because still I think you were doing good. It was just the place where you've been.
Yes. And I mean, I felt like I was failing. I don't necessarily mean I was failing, but that's what it felt like to me. I felt like for the first time in my life, I was actually failing at being a provider.
But the interesting thing about this is actually, because you're used to that structure of everyone's looking out for each other, and you've got that strength in the unit again. But the one thing that you see in the corporate world is like there are certain people who literally push and will go, and somehow they manage to find their way. and others, unless they've got other people around them, and this is where the quality of having leadership in not necessarily where they're the boss, but they're showing leadership skills around. So like you're mentoring, you mentioned the word mentoring quite a few times in the team and you're in the forces. But like when you're in that office environment, if you haven't got someone else who's going, Terry, like today, like I can see you struggling with that. Can I help you with this? Can I show you this? Like, get to this point, and we'll get to that. And then, once you got to that, and you realise that point, and then you go, actually, yeah, that's good. I've achieved that, and then you've got that sense of achievement. Because if you're not getting those little step forwards on achievement, you feel like you're going backwards. It's like going down a plug hole of effects, and I can see where that dark space comes from.
Don't get me wrong. There was people who at times did try to help, but part of me was also I didn't want to burden them. So it's quite often it was struggle in silence, or I know we went through this yesterday or last week, but I still don't get it, kind of thing. So then you feel like I must just look like an idiot, kind of thing. So, and like I say, I had massive imposter syndrome. I just can't describe how imposterous I felt in that whole world. I didn't fit in. Nobody really engaged with me, and those sort of things, those, passing, fleeting nothings, I guess, because that's what they were. They weren't meaningful anything to give me that sort of thing like, oh, I do fit in here, like actually I do enjoy coming to the office.
But would they like that for each other as well? I mean, in general, they didn't engage no one with. Have you seen any people?
Yes and no. They probably had a bit more. Maybe I didn't make the effort. I mean, maybe it wasn't all their fault. It was probably partly mine, but I certainly felt like I was trying to make an effort. But yeah, and it was very female dominant as well, which is not a bad thing. I'm not trying to say it was a bad thing, but obviously the girls like chatting and that sort of thing. They have a different sort of chemistry, I guess. I just felt like I didn't fit in, and all of these things led to that point. So I ended up in August last year being signed off work with chronic depression, and ended up going through some CBT therapy, which obviously at the time in my head I was like, it's just a load of mumbo jumbo, because I hadn't experienced that sort of thing, and but effectively it was just like talking to your mates in the pub. I was missing a lot of things. I'm missing, like leaving the military and moving 300 miles away from the nearest military connection that I had, other than a few mates on the phone. But I couldn't, go to the pub and just talk, men just talk about stuff without realizing that, they're solving a mental health issue, as it were.
Yeah.
I do have friends, don't get me wrong, in Folkestone, but at the time, it's not quite the same. I'm slowly building those relationships up.
Those
where
friendships are very different, aren't they? So different.
Yeah, they are. Because I'm in a cycling club and a couple of my good friends, we can talk about cycling, but I've now opened up to them about my
journey,
the dark times in that journey as well. So they understand that, and but at the time, I guess I didn't want to, pre being diagnosed with severe depression, I just didn't want to burden people with that, and it's funny that because that's probably the thing you actually need is just a few pints, talk to people, and don't get to that point. But anyway, so I got obviously diagnosed with that medication, and then the CBT, which I was having once a week, and this guy called Darren, never met him in person, always on the phone, don't even know what he looks like, but yeah, just talking about it. And one of the things he said to me, right, Terry, clearly nothing's going to change if you stay in the environment that you're in, because that is obviously the root cause. So next week, I want you to come back to me with a plan. Money's no object. What would you do? And I was very much like, well, if money was no object, I'd own my own business and I would do things for myself. And we obviously had that conversation the Monday after, 9 o'clock in the morning it was. And he said, well, what's stopping you? I said, well, I've got a family to look after. And he went, well, it was only a few weeks back that you were thinking about leaving them behind. So how bad can it get? It can't get any worse than that. And at that point, I was like,
Exactly.
do you know what? You're absolutely right. So I had this sort of like idea in my head. I hadn't actioned it. But because I hadn't been at Barclays for long enough, I only got full pay for 2 months. So then obviously I had the issue of I'm getting £400 a week, statutory sick pay. So I persuaded the doctor to allow me to go back to work, because obviously that the financial side is going to be a burden as much as being in that environment kind of thing.
You've got to be able to live. You've got to afford
exactly.
and everything on.
I mean, he wouldn't even pay the freaking electric bill, I don't think, anymore. But do you know what I mean? It was kind of like, So I obviously went through the whole process of ringing the bank saying I can't afford to pay my mortgage and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I mean, all of a sudden it's like, do you know what? There is ways around this. But on return to work, what I thought was my return to work conversation was actually me being told that I'm at risk for being made redundant. So in my head, I'm thinking, this is fantastic.
Just make me.
Yeah. It's fantastic. Okay. So 2 or 3 weeks later, I had a return to work because you can't make someone redundant if they're off sick. Return to work. And then literally, so we're coming up to like December sort of time now. And I had the conversation, your job is being, terminated effectively, or your role is, being made redundant. And at that point then I was like, right, I've got to start my own business. I've got to do this. I've got a little bit of money. It wasn't a huge amount of money. But more importantly, I had 3 months gardening leave where I could not have to worry about money.
The family and how you're going to.
So I had some income to effectively launch a business. So then over that Christmas period, I was, looking at lots of business stuff. I was looking at like, is there any sort of grants I could get? All this sort of stuff. And I came across a fantastic organisation called Ex-Forces Enterprise, which is XFE. They're basically funded by lots of military charities to get ex-forces veterans and their families into business and support them through that process. So I think literally like January the 4th, I did a self-employment discovery workshop, a 1 day. The week after, I signed up for their 2-day course, which is a little bit more in depth. And it just started to give me this confidence, like, I can do this. Did some master classes, did some networking with them. And it just started to give me this, drive. Yes, I can do this. I'm not going to look for a job. I'm going to so I said to Sharon, I'm going to start my own business. I'm going to do drones. And she's like, right, okay, all right. kind of thing.
So drones, now obviously when we go back to the beginning of your story, do you remember you said to us, well, really I wanted to go into the forces because I wanted to be a pilot. So we've gone around full circle to get to the point where sort of the drone bit was flying. Because it's interesting. Why drones?
Possibly not intentionally. I obviously in the military had a lot of exposure to different types of drones.
Okay.
Not the massive ones that fly like 20,000 feet, but in 2007 we had these drones with us that they weren't very good, admittedly. They were made out of polystyrene and they basically got launched off a bungee cord, like a big...
Okay, yeah, like a catapult, effectively.
Yeah, effectively, yeah. And they were disastrous, but I guess they had a little camera in that could send a signal back to a special tablet. Because you think back then, even the iPhone wasn't even out there.
No,
so it was like quite a chunky sort of tablet type thing.
Yeah,
Either tablet hadn't been invented at that point.
2007, 2008.
Yeah, and this was like 2007. So, this was amazing. And I remember looking at this again. It's absolutely amazing. But you'd look at it now and it'd be like watching TV in the 80s. It's kind of like...
grainy and all.
Yeah, grainy, like, really? But at the time, it was absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
But that technology grew, and obviously, the utilization of it didn't change that much. It was still very much used for identification, like put it up in the air, like see what's around the corner, effectively, type thing. But towards the end of my career, during those sort of COVID times, and just a little bit before and after, I wasn't, but part of my team were developing different elements of drones, like use of resupply, so like your logistics, casualty evacuation, and various other stuff. So there was lots of like innovation, pie in the sky, like ideas, as it were. But then, I was taking an interest because I had to, because if I got any questions that I would get asked, like, oh, what do you need for this? Can you do this? And I would obviously go and ask my SME, like, is this possible? We've got another show and tell, at such, because obviously the whole military is interested in the utilization of drones.
Yeah.
So this is obviously all very like military orientated. Hadn't even considered the civil side of it. I was at the time I was in the military. Why would I? And then obviously the innovation that we see with drones in Ukraine, it's like the world is just your imagination. So when I was thinking about the business, I was thinking, what can I do that is I would find interesting, outdoors. I could start relatively cheap. Turns out it's not actually that cheap, but at the time I thought it was. So, and I love being outdoors. So, I was kind of like getting into drones.
And you got a sense of purpose as well.
And I was always, and I was thinking, well, I can go and help them fight in Ukraine with drones, or I can support the British Army and whatever by flying drones and pretending that I was a Russian or whatever, and just helping them with their tactics. And that conversation with a good friend of mine, kind of led me to that. Like, well, if I learn to fly a drone, I can go and support the British Army and then give back.
Okay. Yeah.
So you go, and they're big exercises. You pretend to be an enemy force, try to identify the guys on the ground.
Yeah.
But you could also give it a perspective of, I've been in those positions on the ground, so I can give my experience. And that's kind of what they were looking for.
Yeah.
Is somebody who could give, a mission analysis effectively. So I looked into that. But the more I looked into drones, I started to see that actually there's so much more you can do with these drones. Like I didn't know about surveying, never considered inspection work, and I never knew anything about agricultural aspects.
Yeah.
So when I was doing the research, and if you remember back to the beginning, when I said, I wanted to be a project manager in construction and engineering, because I just love that stuff. I just love learning about it and being awe-inspired by what we can do. Yeah, all the architecture, civil engineer, and all that sort of stuff. So when I realised that, surveying, so I'm like, I could be surrounded by this this audience, so I can be part of it. I can go like, I saw this go from, a piece of wasteland to, this fantastic building or bridge or whatever. So, all of those sort of things, and it really started to excite me. And, that's when I was like, right, I'm going to do drones and I'm going to do the technical side of stuff. Doing my research was like, there is a saturation in the market for just taking photos and videos, because a lot of hobbyists will do that, or
YouTubers,
YouTubers, influencers, all that sort of stuff. So I was like, right, okay, I'm going to focus on the technical side, which is less common, and
which is
do
reaching, I guess, inaccessible places, because it's a lot of times like you can't get to that point unless so you haven't got a tall enough ladder, you haven't got a tall enough access platform.
I mean, a lot of it is it's risky putting a man up, or a person, should I say, at height.
Yes.
Or it's expensive putting scaffolding up.
Yeah.
All of these things. So you think like it's efficient, it's safer, and cost effective as well. When you think
quickly,
you can give results within a very, very short period of time. Yeah. I've been on sites where I've literally done the filming, and as soon as I finish filming, I'll sit down with the client and we'll go through an initial sort of like, this is what we've captured, and I'm looking at a tablet-sized screen, and they're like, wow. And then I send them the proper report thereafter, and they're like, oh my God, it looked good before, but now it looks amazing. You're taking photos or video at like 48 megapixels or 4K, 8K. The detail is there. You can zoom in. And the technology, is absolutely amazing, and that sort of excites me as well, because I love the technology. I love this whole AI. You're using AI to stitch 2,000 pictures together to make this ortho mosaic.
Wow.
And the AI will do it. Take like 12 hours to do it.
Oh, really? Wow, that's a lot of processing. Wow.
But and it's just amazing that you can do that, and it's like centimeter accurate, where you can actually do measurements on there. You can say like, well, you see that hole there, that is such size.
Yeah.
And then somebody who's hand it over to a specialist or a subject matter expert, and they go, right, okay, I now know what I need to do to get that fixed.
Yeah.
And at that point, no one has even been
to see it
on the roof or wherever it is, or on the wind turbine.
That shows where the weakness points are.
Yeah, it shows the problem. Yeah. There's your problem. I've given you half the solution. I'm not there to tell them how to fix it, because I'd be making it up. But you're transparent with that. Is I can give you the tools. You just need to go away and do it.
But I guess, and now you're in that situation because of the detail, and it's not just flying a drone here. It's having the imagery and the quality of the camera, which is one thing, but piecing that software together, and you are now coming into an area where you become a little bit more unique, I would have thought, and very much more focused. And obviously you focused on that training, because obviously you must have done a lot of training, a lot of self-learning, a lot of studying, and the discipline that you had, again, going back to the forces, that discipline to do something and find a way, you've used that discipline, and also it's now giving you a full sense of purpose.
Yeah, the sense of purpose, 100% tick.
Yes.
Because
that's the
I feel good. I get up in the morning, feel good.
Empowered to go in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, we still have moments.
Yep.
Who doesn't?
Yeah.
But, there's a drive to keep going.
Yep.
This is my success, and I'm going to keep driving the success of my business, effectively my baby, as it were.
But it's a very fine line. It's interesting, because success, when you get success and you see success and you see the results, the days when you don't have a result and you don't have a success, you start to, even when you have a lot of success, you can still get those moments of self-doubt.
Yeah, I mean, probably had them Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday this week.
The problem is that, unfortunately, probably it's like a people thing. We always focus on this negativity, and it's where you have to work with your brain and mentality to stop. Even we do this sometimes. Usually I'm the person who's like, oh, this didn't work or something failed in the software or whatever. And Richard will be, okay, but how many things we've done? And it's really the small shift that you need to focus on the how many positive things you've done actually. So
but it's interesting, like
tomorrow
even as you know,
do
just as you came today, like we had a thing, it wasn't connect, this wasn't working. You think, right, now I've got to solve it, and I'm under pressure, and I've got to do it now because you're about to walk into the room,
or I do.
you walk in, and then all of a sudden we're just going through the structure, but you do that little bit, and you focus, and then as soon as you get there, you get that sense of achievement again, and those little successes always, and they build up and build up and build up, but you don't always see the level of success that you have.
Yeah, so I, and the down points are at the minute, I'm obviously a brand new business. I knew from the beginning it's not just going to go, boom.
Yeah.
I'm profitable. I've got multiple jobs. I'm turning them down. I knew that wouldn't be the case. But when it's the reality and you're in it, you're kind of like, have I made a huge mistake here? Have I misjudged the need and all that sort of stuff? Yeah. But you've got to remember that, my partner, Sharon, she's always like saying, but you just knew, this is it. And what's more important is, to me, I don't want loads of clients. What I want is some really good clients that I can partner with, and they come to me for everything to do it. Yeah, and that's more important to me.
Quality.
Yeah, they know that they're going to, and I will not hand something over to a client unless I think it's
the right one.
Absolutely spot on. Or I won't ask them for money at that point. It's ironic because you still question yourself. I did, for a surveyor that I met through the chamber, I did a roof inspection for them because they don't have that capability. So they don't have this capability. So I'm trying to build this rapport and this partnership with this said business. So I do the job, I give them the products, invoice them as you would expect. I ask them for a Google review. They give me a 5-star review, and it's brilliant. You're like, this is exactly what I need. Yeah. This is it. Yeah. But then I start questioning, well, why haven't they not rang me back, asking me to do more? Yeah. So you start thinking to yourself, did they just say that? Did they just say that? So he's like, yeah, thanks, Terry, but we don't need you anymore. And those sort of self-doubts come in place. Now, I'm sure that's not the case. They probably just don't have a need for it. But, as the days and weeks turn into a month or so, and you're like, I was kind of hoping I'd get at least one job a week from them, but maybe the reality is they don't see that utilization yet. Or, it's not within their price.
What you're starting is quite new.
Yeah, it's probably 10 years, sort of 10 years in, yeah.
But I guess now, if you're in a situation, because, even today, people will obviously see this and they'll understand, and particularly people on LinkedIn, if they're looking for someone who can come along and give a detailed survey, not just fly in here and show you, there's zoom in here and there's a crack, fly off again and go back. It's the detail and the report and the information that you can structure and piece together to give people something which is absolutely almost unique and incredible, and to reliably be able to do it and to give it accurate service.
Yeah, sorry. My focus is on the deliverables for the client. The methodology, they don't need to know how it's done.
No.
If they're interested, obviously I will share that information.
Yeah.
But what's their problem? Here's the solution that I can come up with. Because some businesses won't require a detailed, 3D, 2D model. They might just want some pictures. So, or
You're quite
farmer.
flexible in
Yeah,
their
you've got to be
requests.
flexible. There is no fixed price for said product. It's about like trying to get it right for them, and like I said to you, it's more important to have a partnership of returning business than going,
Absolutely.
oh yeah, I'll just charge them this. They're I'm trying to get repeat business. If they can give me repeat business, then I'm going to get my investment back.
And that will be a circle of trust as well, because you'll build up that trust with that particular client, and they'll know that they can rely on you 100%. Sorry, and they'll come back and come back, and that's the key.
That's certainly what we're aiming for. I'm not here to make a quick buck. I think I would have gone into something different than drones if I was after a quick buck. Yeah.
So where people can find you? Obviously, we found you on LinkedIn, and we find you to the Chamber of Commerce, and after that we found you on LinkedIn. But have you got a website?
We've got a website. A good friend of mine in my cycling club did it for me.
Okay.
So
we'll share this with the video.
So that's horusdrones.com. If look me up on there. But I'm on LinkedIn. I've got a YouTube channel. Admittedly, I don't put as much on there as I probably could or should. I've also got Instagram and Facebook. But prior to this venture, I was very much social media phobe. So I'm kind of
you're learning.
I'm still learning the ropes. And we talked about before we started. I do a blog on LinkedIn, which I've started to do, and they're obviously on my website as well. So I'm trying to, write a white paper once a month, just to give insights, because the biggest thing with the technical side of drone technology is people don't know. That
I told you earlier, for me, drones are 12 years, boys, how they play around.
Exactly. A drone's either a toy, taking fancy pictures, or videos. That's what most people think they are, or a hindrance when they're flying above their garden and stuff like that.
Is there a lot of legislation about that, and where you can fly and where you can't fly, and who can fly?
Yeah, there's huge amounts, and effectively you can start off very, very small. You can buy any drone. That's the biggest thing, is there's no barrier to buying. Nobody's asking you, have you got a license to fly that? They'll just sell it you. There's no, there might be some, but you can easily just go on Amazon and buy a drone, for example. So the rules are that if you've got a drone below 250 grams, you can fly it in what's called an A1 or A3 area. But you've got to do an online bit of training, which takes about half an hour, 30 questions, I think it is. And then you pay for an operator's ID, which is about 10 quid. You've got to have the landowner's permission to fly the drone for a start, which I guarantee most people don't. It's got to be at least 150 meters away from a residential commercial properties.
Okay.
So most fields in a park rules them out. And then you can't fly above 120 meters, and it's got to be within line of sight. So you have got to be able to see it. And when they say see it with your own eyes, and you've got to be able to tell the orientation of it, i.e. which way it's facing.
Yeah. Wow.
So you think a 250 gram drone is probably not much bigger or smaller really than that glass. With the quadcopter arms out, really tiny. The paint it like grey, the same colour as the sky in the UK, so you can't even see it. Yeah, so
let alone which direction it's going.
And I see all the time. So there's also this thing called Drone Assist, which is an app done by the CAA, which is Civil Aviation Authority, to try and mitigate it, where like it tells you where you can't fly. It tells you where people like me, I will always record where I'm going to be flying. So I put like effectively an area around it to warn other air users that I will be flying my drone in this area, so that other air users know that, okay, I need to watch out for a drone, or I'm going to fly above, because I can only go up to 120 meters. So, if you're in a light aircraft, microlight, whatever, as long as I stay above 120 meters, should be safe. Yeah. Yep. I mean, that's the idea. But I've seen people, looking on social media and stuff like that, and you can see that they are flying in areas where you're not permitted to fly. And down in Folkestone, there's quite a big area that you're not allowed to fly in along the coastline. You go over to Dover, there's a permanent area. So effectively, you can't fly over Dover Castle. I would love to fly over Dover Castle, and get the footage, because it's an amazing castle.
Absolutely.
I mean, I can apply to fly in that area because that's the luxury that I have with the level of licensing that I have.
So
but it will cost me money.
If the castle came along to you, so you need to do a survey, then immediately you get a license, and that would be your opportunity.
Well, effectively, you would seek permission and get a license to fly for that period of time. So you are effectively, one, getting permission, then you're engaging with the people who own that airspace, which happens to be the Coast Guard. So then you're engaging with them so that they know that you're flying in that area. And it's a collaboration. It's not just turning up, and also the landowner who owns English Heritage, I think, own the castle. So it's not just turning up and taking a load of pictures. It's ensuring that everybody knows that you're going to do that. What's your purpose for being there? How long are you going to be there? And you're in communication with them at all times. I'm starting to fly now. I've finished flying, all that sort of stuff. And effectively, the rules are pretty much like as if you were flying a plane.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. It sounds like a commercial airline. You're sort of saying this is.
You go through all the processes,
Yeah, this is the flight plan and everything.
So when I come across people and say, "Oh yeah, just chuck a drone up," and I'm like going,
not like that.
Yeah, you're probably not insured. You're probably not licensed to fly, and you haven't even considered the fact that you might be flying in an area you're not allowed to fly in. Like the old Gatwick scenario that we had several years ago.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
at the moment, are you alone in the business? Have you got other people with you, or you are doing everything?
I am the every role that there is. Every role. I was gonna try and be smart and go, I am this, I am that, but I'm just everything.
You're doing everything.
Excellent.
Yeah. But I would love to, take on an apprentice, get someone in the business, all of that sort of stuff. Or, give somebody
an opportunity.
To
learn the skills.
And and getting a youngster on board, who's very good at social media, all of a sudden half of my problems would be solved because they're just like, I love doing this sort of stuff. And I don't know who wouldn't love to be flying a drone for as a job as well.
And what a great experience that would be.
Yeah. So hopefully, in a year or two, once I've got the work
established. Yeah.
But I will very much, and I've already written it into my policies and all that sort of stuff, that I will be very focused on the individuals. If you make them feel good about working for you, then they will give their all for you. I honestly believe that. Not everything's about money for people. It's about feeling good.
Excellent. Terry, well, listen, thank you this evening for spending so much time sharing an incredible story with us. We've covered a lot of aspects this evening, but we really appreciate your time on this. So much, I think, for everyone to get their heads around. And obviously, if you need a professional drone pilot to do something quite incredible, here is your man. Please do contact Terry. We'll leave all the links underneath the video as we share it. So, Terry, thank you very much. Please, if you're watching on YouTube, please do give us a like and subscribe to the channel. And obviously, if you're on Spotify, please do give us a follow. Terry, thank you very much.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
We wish you all the best, and we're sure we're going to see you again.
Well, hopefully we'll see you, another chamber event.
I'm sure you will.
Yes.
Thank you very much, everyone.